now I will hand over to Nicholas, who's very kindly agreed to come and talk about the nature of the Easneye estate. I think it says in my notes here, worked in London for a number of years as an equities analyst before presumably seeing the light and returning to the real love, which was back into the countryside and the home to the farm where he grew up, near Ware in 2006. Looking after the natural landscape and working closely with the Wildlife Trust and many others to create that as a haven for wildlife, particularly the River Ash, I think, which runs through the estate. Nicholas.
Thank you very much, Peter. Well, I must say I'm absolutely delighted to be here. It's a great occasion to be celebrating 150 years and to be here to talk a little bit about Easneye, a little bit about our corner of the of Hertfordshire. It's a privilege, so I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm the High Sheriff. I will explain this bit first. I'm not always dressed up like this. For those that you know, the High Sheriff, it's a one-year appointment. It's a voluntary role. It's a very ancient institution going back nearly 1,000 years. And it has two purposes, one principal purpose, which is around supporting the criminal justice system, the judges, the police, the probation service, everything to do with criminal justice. That's what the historic connection was, and today we still have a nominal role in that way to support these people in the work that they do. So that's why I'm dressed up like this, and I've been to the courts yesterday, I've been around with the police many times, and that's a big part. Second part of the role is around, each sheriff can have some sort of theme, and I've chosen a theme which is nurture through nature. And a bit of that comes to what I'll talk to in a minute, which is about my life as a farmer and what I count myself very privileged to enjoy as I go about my daily business, and how powerful and important that is in what I find and how it can be for others, whether they be young people, whether they have special educational needs, maybe they are ex-offenders, the elderly, there's a whole lot of things. But I think there is great merit in nurture through nature. And that's my message. I'm trying to reach out across the county and find all those charities that are working in that field for that. So that's a bit about me when I'm dressed up like this. When I'm not dressed up like this, I'm a farmer. I've now been working in Easneye for near enough 20 years. Before that, Peter, you're right, I worked in London. That's what I did. Got some skills in administration and spreadsheets and finance, many of which have been quite useful recently, but that's what it is. But it was time for a change about 20 years ago, near enough my 40th birthday. Time for me, and a time perhaps for the estate to move forward. I was very fortunate to inherit an excellent chap, David Craddock, who's our arable foreman, who is up for some change. And particularly my dear wife Henrietta, who's sat here as well, who has a clear interest, a strong interest in conservation, especially birds. And she's a very keen photographer. So many of the photographs you'll see in the motor, in fact nearly all of them, I think are Henry's photographs that she's taken over the last 20 years or so. So that's me and why I'm here. So just in outline very briefly, I am going to talk to the river, absolutely. That is fundamental to what we're doing. I'm going to talk a bit about farming and what we do and how it's changed in the last 20 years or so. I'm going to talk a bit briefly about woodland, but it's an important section. Woodland and the regeneration thereof is really important, and it's something we've been able to do a little bit about. And then some broader bits on wildlife, which will come. And at the end, I'll do a few closing thoughts. And please do have some questions as well. So I don't know how clearly that comes up on the screen, but this is the map that we use of the Easneye estate. I think you'll get that. I'll just come away from the microphone briefly, just so you can see. So this is Stansted Abbots down here, and Ware up to the left, Ware side of Whitford. So this is a sort of contiguous bit. There's no offlying bits. For us, it's very fortunate that it's all in one place. Easneye, the name here, means island in the marshes. It's an Old English name. And it's the house here, is in the middle here, it stands on some high ground. Many people have seen that probably from the Animal Reserve. It does stand on high ground. And I think it would have been surrounded by marshes. Because you have the River Lee that extends this way down here, and here's the River Ash that extends up this way. And the high ground is here, and then some high ground to the north over there, and this is higher here. But it is an island within the marshes. I think there is a real sense of that. The Amwell Reserve, again, many of you will know, is to the south there, and that's a very important part when I come on to stewardship and how the role that's played in the work that we're trying to do. Soils, we've got some heavy chalky boulder clay on the higher ground. Elsewhere, there's a huge mix of gravels and chalks and all sorts. So a wide variety of different soils, bringing forth different plant life and the like, according to that. Ancient woodland, you can see the bits in green. There's a big block through here, the Easneye woods. This is a wood we were very fortunately able to acquire recently called Newgate, which has been undisturbed for a long, long time. The railway runs through, here's the old railway that runs the Buntingford Flyer, which runs up here, or it did until 1962, down there, and it connected down to St Margaret's. And this blue line here is the North Meridian, so we're exactly north of Greenwich. So if you've got your orientation, that's where it is. So I'm going to start with talking about the river, which is a good place to start, because everything flows from that, really. As you will all know, it's an immensely important corridor and connector within the landscape. And I'm going to go back 20 years or so to a meeting that, was it a meeting? It was a pint of beer, to be honest, at our house when we sat around a table. And I can see Phil Belfield here. I think you were sat at the table. I think Tim Hill was sat at that table, as was, I think, Simon Cox from the Wild Trout Society. And we all sat down there, and we just sort of, between us, what they knew, and it dawned on me that the river is a really important asset to the estate, and we really must work on it. And that's how it came to be. So, over those 20 years, what have we achieved? What's the story so far? Well, over the first 10 years or so, perhaps, and a bit more, I was able to do a little bit of work installing some of my own deflectors and coppicing a bit of alder to let some more light into the river and such like that. Quite small beer, really. But we started to get going when there was Five Rivers did an overview study of the river and what could be done. They were thinking particularly about removing obstacles to allow free passage of migratory fish, letting more light in, introducing more gravel to re-establish the riffle and pool sequence, which had rather deteriorated and been dredged, and all those sort of things. So very important groundwork was done by Five Rivers in terms of feasibility and permissions. So that was the first bit. Next bit was a sort of a trial run, really, or at least a proof of concept, when we did about a half a mile immediately above the house where Henrietta and I live. And some fairly intensive works were done along those lines, putting in some more gravel, taking down some trees to let the light in, and such like. A bit of regrading around the edge, and I'll show you a section in a minute. And this is an example a bit later on the project, where you can see, again, those of you that are familiar, Waters Place, some of you perhaps will know, which is pretty much in the centre of the farm. This is the River Ash, that is the ford. And what we're trying to do here is, and what is being done, is putting in a good amount of gravel downstream of the ford so as to raise the water level and reduce the step up that was previously inhibiting free movement of fish. So that the water immediately below the bridge is a bit deeper and there's a smaller step up which allows the fish to travel more easily. So fairly intensive works with quite a lot of gravel. So this was work that was done by a firm called R.J. Bull. And they were involved in half the river from about where Henry and I live down to the confluence of the River Lee. And I'll come on to a second bit. We're going to practicality brown, which is the next bit. So that's gravel going in the river. So where did the gravel come from? This was fantastic. Really excited about this. This is one of our fields. It's a field called Warren Bottom. And there's a clue in the name because you couldn't grow anything there. It's all sand and gravel. Absolutely useless field. And we've been trying to grow wheat for years and it's no good. So we just thought, well, there must be some gravel in there somewhere. So R.J. Bull brought in their team and we got to digging. And I think they pulled out close to 1,000 tonnes of gravel from here. And it was all cleaned and sorted and separated. And that, being so close to the river, was absolutely valuable because they could cart it exactly to where it needed to go and tip it into the river with these wonderful big dumpers. So that was fantastic. And then having dug this hole, we backfilled it with everything that was regraded from the sides of the river banks. So in a moment I'll show you another slide, but here is the next slide. There. So what you can perhaps see there is that the channel was previously quite deeply incised and steep banked. And they've cut this bank here, pushed some of it into the stream, reinforced it with some woody debris and some stakes and things to hold it in place, removed some of the debris and taken that off, and introduced the wiggle that you see around there. A lot of gravel's gone in here, there's some large woody debris in here creating turbulence and habitat for small fish, and the river is a much more interesting flow. There's much more light coming in there, and this is very interesting habitat, especially for juvenile fish. So it's a huge change on where we were before. And the regraded material that was taken away was taken back to there, put underneath, and the topsoil that was previously stripped off the top, put over the top, and lo and behold, within 6 months that was returned not to an arable field, but to a stewardship scheme. That's now 81 flowers, which what you will know is a good mix of flowers and a lot of insects and everything on there. So they're, in the space of 10 months or so, complete transformation, both to the river, but also to an arable field, which is now much more interesting as a wild flower place. Just to digress for a second, it looks lovely there, and there's some lovely marginal planting. You can probably pick out some of the planting going on around the side here. This side over here, I have to say, absolutely covered in Himalayan balsam. In the space of probably 18 months, that has got completely overwhelmed. And it is really difficult. And we do have a significant extent of the river. I can't pull it all. Perhaps there's some room volunteers, but importantly there is the rust which has been introduced under license to try and weaken the plants. Those of you that will know about it, it's been talked about on one of these events previously. It was licensed by CABI about 2-3 years ago perhaps, and they released this particular rust which infects the plant, doesn't kill it but it weakens it and allows others to compete more effectively. Because, sad to say, whereas there was lovely, Sarah did some lovely planting under there, completely swamped by the shade and shaded out by the Himalayan balsam. So we really hope that that rust, which has now been released here, well, a little downstream from here and upstream, will in time infect those plants and allow the true native marginals to establish. So that's correct. Just another example, again, Henny's photograph, thank you Henny. So this was an example where this oxbow lake has been retrieved, recovered, rebuilt. It's there on the old maps, but it was completely dried up as the river passed by the far end. So the river previously went straight along there, in fact it still does, but there is now a quiet refuge, a backwater here, of relatively calm, still water for insects and dragonflies and such like. And this is alive with insects and things in the summer. And the marginal plant, the balsam for some reason hasn't infected here, so it's thriving. There's a hibernaculum that was built up there with a lot of woody debris covered over some topsoil. I don't know what's inside there, but something is, I'm sure. But there's an old feature which has been recreated off the back of this funding. So a lot of this was the work of R.J. Bull, a contractor that was used in the first part. Well, I need to explain where the money came from, don't I? So we did a bit by myself, we did a bit with Five Rivers, and then Sarah Perry, is Sarah here actually, because she really ought to get a shout out. No, she's not. Sarah Perry from the Hearts and Middlesex Wildlife Trust, unbeknownst to Henny or I, put in a bid under the Species Recovery Grant to do with the restoration of the River Ash and the particular bit that lies within our patch. And lo and behold, she won. And she was one of only 20 grants in the whole country that won funding. And that was a game changer for us. That released significant funding that has allowed us to restore the entire length of the ash within our ownership. And that's work that was just completed a few weeks ago. Here I can say a bit more about this. So this is right at the top near Whitford. Those of you who can remember the map, Whitford was sort of top right up here. Looks a bit like golf course. It's not a golf course. It's a floodplain, a picture taken from a drone, looking down at the course of the River Ash, which flows down here and on down the valley down that way. And in times of flood, in times of winter, a lot of this is covered in water. It's grazed by cattle. There's a lot of public access across here. There's a footpath along there, there's a private way along that way, another one down this way. So it's well known by people that live nearby and well loved. But there was an opportunity, as I say, to use this funding to really rejuvenate the river and bring a lot of life to what had been a fairly stale, dank bit of water and dredged in the past. So gravel riffles we talked about, high water refuges. There's a biggish one sort of back this way where the water, in terms of high water, there's a sort of back channel where trout and salmon can escape, get out of the weight of water and not be pressured in that way. There's some new ponds and things and scrapes that have been created within the floodplain. They're quite deep, they're profiled so as to have shallow bits and then deeper bits, so there should always be water there. These ones are not fenced, and the cattle are able to drink from those. That one is fenced, to keep them out, which will create a different set of habitats. This is a rather lovely old ditch from a long time ago that Tim and I dredged probably 10 years ago, more than that, 15 years ago perhaps, which is positively infested with water voles. So we weren't able to do very much with it at all this year, except we put in a bit of a bund here so as to hold back the water for a bit longer through the spring and into the summer. And then interestingly over this side here, you might just be able to see a line extending over here. And again, this is what's called a paleo channel. And for those of you that are familiar with old maps and things, or even the LiDAR data, that was a channel that was evident, and the river at one point would have occupied, but for some reason, likely dredging, it was the new channel was created. This long, straight, and very boring section was there. But a good amount of effort went into recreating that paleo channel. And in time, we hope the river will adopt that as its main channel, leaving the earlier channel as a refuge, as a sort of quiet backwater. But that's a lovely gravel sequence. A lot of gravel went in there to create the correct sequence and all of that. But it's a very exciting thing, and it's sort of very rough and ready. You can walk along there. Do go and have a look, because we're proud of it. And a lot of people enjoy it. A lot of people from the village of Whitford nearby helped with marginal planting. So they came along and the plants were provided, but they planted in one day. So it was a huge thing, and big credit to Sarah Perry particularly. In fact, if you bought your Hertfordshire Mercury, you might even see on the front page this week, we have Sarah Perry and me, not sure what about me, and others, and the work that's been done. But it's a significant thing. So that was all done by Practicality Brand, by a different contractor. A wider piece, just sort of Environment Agency. Thank you to Phil and others. The annual fish counts are done, electrofishing up and down the river. That's a very important record. I haven't got the numbers to hand, but that's monitored as to biomass and number and all of that. We're hoping, obviously, with creating a lot of habitat for juveniles, that we'll see a lot more, many more reds. We've got the Wild Trout Trust counting reds. They're coming again in November. So we're hoping that we'll have a lot more wild populations coming through. They introduced grayling. We had a couple of thousand grayling, I think, with little fingerlings, very small ones, were introduced in different places in the River Ash. And again, we hope they will enjoy and thrive. Predators, yeah, we had talk of mink a moment ago. I think it was in 2010, I haven't looked this up, but 1 year we had 24 mink caught in our traps. A very long time ago, but I'm touching wood. I don't think we've had one for 4 years or even 5 years. And we've got 3 traps up and down the River Lee, and we monitor them all. and we haven't got any mate. And thereby, the voles have had a great opportunity. So they are thriving to such an extent that the works we had planned had to be significantly reworked to avoid where their latrines and where they're established within the river. Cormorants, yeah, I'm afraid they're not good. Whether it's individuals passing up and down the river from the animal reserve or anywhere else, or squadrons of 8, that's the most I've seen in one squadron. I don't know where they land, but they will hoover up everything, so I'm not a fan of cormorants. Otters, I'm absolutely relaxed about. The sadness is we've only ever come across one otter in the River Ash. It was quite recently, I think 2 years ago. I'm afraid it was killed on the river, on the road where the ash goes under the river, under the B1004. So it was killed, but if there is a positive from that, it shows that the otters are using the River Ash, so which is a lovely story. What else is going on? Here's a face some people might recognise, Robin Cole. Peter, you were talking about riverfly monitoring a moment ago. Here's Robin doing his stuff. These are Barry Dawes' Jersey cows, and he hasn't come a cropper yet. I do worry sometimes a bit, but there we are. He's very determined, and we're very grateful to him. I think there's 3 different places where the kick sampling is done, and those records are kept. There's places where it's much improved as a result of the works, and there's other places where there's room for improvement. But in general, I think the ash is in reasonably good heart. We worry about the water treatment plant, which is immediately upstream at Whitford, but again, I'm not too worried. Yeah, but well done, Robin, for the work that he does. This one's got a bit out of sequence, but never mind. These are some elm trees. There are 7 there. The one on the left has died, sadly, but these are large elm trees, and they have survived so far. And whether they're all the same genetic material that has been cut and planted along the hedge, I don't know. But I know 2 other elms on the estate that are still doing well, mature trees. So it's not all doom and gloom for elm trees. So then a bit about farming, I think. So, as I say, I came back from London with a sort of head for figures and spreadsheets and such like, and that's what you need for stewardship and all these things. We've been in an ELS, environmental entry-level scheme. We've been in HLS. We've now got 2 countryside stewardship mid-tier schemes going on, 1 higher tier scheme going on, 2 SFI schemes. And it's not to be underestimated the effort that goes into fulfilling the obligations. You are under significant pressure to do what you're asked to do, and if you don't, you get fined, whether that's within your control or not. So it is a challenge, but for us it's a really important element of the estate's cash flow. It's a reasonably reliable number that comes in regularly in a way that for the rest. And just to make the point, so the last SFI scheme, which is a big one for us, we got in on the 1st of March this year. And I think the scheme closed on the 20th of March this year, or thereabouts. And I got that in there. I rang my MP, I wrote 3 letters to the Royal Payments Agency saying, why has this not been happening? It had been entered 6 months previously, and they had not processed it. And that was a big figure in our cash flow. And it was only a result of badgering that I got it through, and it really matters, and a lot of people didn't get it, and it speaks to a little bit to where we're at in the farming industry and the challenges we're under at the moment. But that's a nice picture. That shows a buffer strip of some flowers, 88 flowers alongside a crop of wheat. What's the beekeeper name called? Rob Gabriel, there he is with his hives. They do very nicely. There were some bees over the hedge. So there's some beans just over the hedge, so we had a very good year. But it's lovely to see that, and obviously that helps my crop, as well as the bees having a nice time up and down the strips. That's just a close-up of the map that you saw earlier. It just gives you a flavour of things, really. As I say, here's a Newgate Wood, which we were able to acquire recently. Got a ride running through it, some high seats here for controlling deer. Some ponds over here, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 ponds in that area of landscape you can see there. Very important principles of an axis and corridors. So there's some land around the side of between these two fields, which is difficult to cultivate, difficult to work, so that's been given over to flowers along the side there, creating a corridor both sides of that hedge, connecting this wood down to here. Here again we have lots of ponds. This has recently been coppiced, it's a good bit of woodland there, and replanted. This is some AB9 winter cover, creating this axis, developing this axis all the way through along here to this woodland and on that way. So this is the footpath dotted here. This is set back from the footpath. It's relatively quiet, and it's a really important dark corridor for bats and things, and for insects and for mammals to move around. As I say, this is something we've acquired quite recently, and it's very isolated. So I'm looking to how we can connect it, maybe planting a hedge over here, or reinforcing some of these connections to bring it into the landscape, because it's powerful. Yeah, so that I'm excited about that. When we had a visit a while ago, and here's some infield trees here. That now I built a beetle bank around those infield trees. Generations past might not have worried about infield trees, and we have lost a lot. But I think they are really rather wonderful. So by building a stewardship scheme around them, we can effectively look after the root zone and place them back within the landscape. So that's just a detail, perhaps, of one part of the scheme that we have. Talking a bit about farming, more generally, perhaps. So over the last 20 years or so, the business of farming, or at least the more progressive end of it, has moved forward a lot. And there's a lot of talk of caring for soils, talking about resilience and for climate change and all of that. Those of you who know about groundswell, there's concepts around min-till, minimum tillage. We don't want to be spending a lot of money on diesel, turning soil over. It upsets the earthworms, they don't like it. It upsets all of the infiltration that's established by those earthworms, and all those biological processes. It just doesn't work. So it's something we've got into progressively, not feet first, but progressively. But to illustrate how it is, so this is an example. That's a drill, it's called a horizon drill. We bought it a couple of years, and I don't mind telling you, it cost £130,000. So there is significant investment to try and do things differently. It's not just a, never mind, we can do it with the old harrow, whatever it is. There's a lot of money. It's a wonderful drill that it can establish crops in one pass. So it can pass through a stubble, or even established cover crops, where you may have 18 inches of cover crops stood in front of the drill. It has things called clean sweeps, which stand in front of the disc. They part the crop in front, and then the disc cuts into the soil, and the seed is placed behind, and then it's rolled in one pass. So whereas you might otherwise have to plough in the old days and cultivate and roll and then drill and all that sort of stuff, in one pass this does the job. And indeed it has not one but two tanks there. So some of the things we're experimenting with this year are growing wheat, but with a companion crop of beans. So if you grow a legume to get with the wheat, that has it fixes some nitrogen. And then we can eliminate the beans come the springtime, and then you've got a clean crop of wheat to take through to harvest. So it's an amazing bit of kit, and we think it will pay. So there we are. We do have a plough, by the way, because there are pests like black grass and the like, which are really difficult to kill. And for the minute, we just want to have that in reserve. It's under a wrap in the barn somewhere, but if wherever we need it, it's there. So I think I just wanted to say on that, really, that there are a lot of challenges in farming. We heard a moment ago about this last drought. I'm sure Finis' records are better than mine, but we think we're about 6 inches down on the rainfall we should have had so far this year, which is a huge amount. I think it was 2 years ago, did we have 37 degrees temperature, or a day it was 37, even more, I think. it's just not normal. It's not how it should be. There are freak rain events. And yes, we're trying to defend the soils by not turning it, keeping the thatch on top here to protect it from heavy rain, and to hold moisture underneath so that things germinate in dry conditions. But it's a difficult environment. Harvest 2025, I think our yields are probably down about 15% on a previous year. Other places are much worse. Prices are down about 15%. Labour is scarce, and this is a fixed cost business. So if your revenues are going down by 30% or something, it's difficult. So I'm not asking for sympathy, but I think people need to understand farmers are under significant pressure. Alongside that, we've got the SFI scheme, which was cancelled. Now I think it's been extended for another year, maybe until the government's worked it out. BPS has gone. And I mentioned the family farm tax. So I just think, for context, the industry is under a lot of pressure. And there's things that we would otherwise have been glad to do, and just because we love doing it. There will be farmers out there, and I count myself lucky because we're not the smallest of farms. We'd be a mid-sized farm or even a little more. There will be a lot of people under significant pressure from their bank managers. That's where they are. A little bit about livestock. Some sheep. Sheeps, as Jeremy Clarkson would say. We have them back after 40 years. As a child, Dave Rowe used to look after the sheep. The orphan lambs, I used to go and feed them in the evenings. We had 2 dairies. We had a pig unit. John Himpson used to the pig unit. But no longer. And for a long period, there were no cattle, there was no livestock at all. But we now have them back, and I think they're an important part of a mixed farm. I'm really pleased with that. Barry Dodds does have some dry cows. You saw them earlier. But that's what they are. And there is a cover crop. That's what we grow. That's an arable field. That, when it was last autumn, that went into a crop of winter wheat. That's doing tremendous good. You can see the photosynthesis is going on, the diversity there, the good that does to the soil as those roots penetrate and the insect life does all their good. There's some phacelia, radish, buckwheat, berseem clover, all sorts in there. Hedges, new hedge planting, very important for connections. Again, we've done a good bit of that. Again, drought. A lot of those plants died, and we had to replant them. So the grant may cover the plant, but watch out, because if half of them die and the rest, you've got a lot of gapping up to do when the following year. And the woodland. So this is often overlooked, and we as farmers think about the arable land, and for a long time there's been no money in woodland at all. And there still is no money, but there's more than there was, and there are grants there to help us do the work that needs to be done. Here you see some coppicing. This work was coppicing some hornbeam, wood called thistle, and this was a few years ago now, and it's absolutely wonderful how these stools have regenerated, and they're now 12, 15 feet high, and there's a dense canopy, and there's sort of rides in a way that for probably 30, 40 years it became overgrown and dark and desolate. So that's what it was. A harvesting machine went through. Here's the forwarding trailer, gathered everything up. Again, there's no money in there, but at least these woods have been put back into good heart. And best of all, for us, so we have a wood chip boiler. So there's some commercial, there's an old farmyard that we've developed into offices, and the whole thing is heated by a wood chip boiler. This is an absolute beast of a machine that comes along once a year and fills up a store with our wood that we've harvested from the farm, chips it in there, and then the boiler takes a year to consume that. So it's all very green, and it's a good use of stuff. That's our son Tom, who has planted Tom's wood. This was a plantation of conifers that was felled about 3 years ago. He planted those trees, mixed broadleaf, quite a dense plant, and again, a lot, actually about 30% died, and so we've had to replant those. The deer have taken some others, but you can see what was harvested in the background there, and in time that will grow on, and many of you will know more of the insects and things, but having established that coop, having established that open ground, that quiet space, I think a lot of insects will benefit from that. And I think there's a chap in Rothamsted actually who I was talking to the other day, and he was saying that really people worry about insects in the arable landscape, but they're faring reasonably well. It's the insects in the woodland landscape that are suffering, and I think part of that is how little management there is going on, so it's important. Then lastly, a bit on sort of wildlife. I'm going to talk about what owls, ponds, and black poplar. Robert Phillips, I think, will be known to some of you, who we're very grateful to for his work with the owls. I think we have 8 or 10 barn owl boxes across the farm, all handmade in my workshop, and it's lovely to see them when we do. Sad to say, we've not a single young bird this year from all those owl boxes, not a single one. And whether that's the scarcity of voles or whether, I don't know, others will know better than me. But in other years we've done much better. Some years we've had as many as 14 young across those 8 owl boxes. 1 or 2 broods in each box, and as many as 14 young. So it's a lovely thing to be part of. We see it in the landscape, and he's rather missed them this year because there aren't any to photograph, so it's a sadness. But when they come back, and I believe they're very good at recolonising, they will come back. Ponds, not to miss ponds, an important bit. We heard about dragonflies earlier. So this is a lovely pond, which was restored. I don't think this was restored. I think this is Scott's old pond. But this is what a pond can be. Next to an arable landscape with a grass buffer around the outside, fresh water for mammals, insects love it, and everything else. With Lucy Jenkins, another shout out for another person, Lucy Jenkins from Ware. She has worked with us, and we've restored 15 ponds across the landscape. We saw a few of them on the pond on the map a moment ago. And they are immensely important, and a complete joy to go out and see that on a spring day and what's going on. So that's an established one. This is us working on a ghost pond. For those of you who don't know, again, if you look back to old maps, you find them. There's a hill farm is just to the right of this. This would have been the pond where the horses would have drunk. But for whatever reason it became filled in and lost in the landscape. We got the digger in with Lucy's help and the like, and dug, and that doesn't look dramatic, but the next bucket load, it was a gusher, just extraordinary. What's a dry landscape, that pond filled almost to where the tracks of the digger are with the next bucket load, and there was a lens of water within the landscape that was hidden. And then it was revealed, and now it's a new pond, so it's got water fleas and the like, and nothing much besides. But in the years to come, it will develop, and it'll be a treasure. And that's Phil the digger man digging it, who's excellent. Just to name check again, some important people in the world of ponds. Lucy Jenkins, I mentioned on the left. Steve Brooke, absolutely invaluable support and knowledge, the most knowledgeable fellow when it comes to ponds, and a great enthusiast. And Carl Sayer, too, who came by to visit, who's a bit of a luminary in the world of ponds, and it was lovely to have them have their input and just feed off their enthusiasm when we're developing this project. So we've done a lot of ponds, I think many more than 15 actually, but that's what I had written down. Just to finish, so black poplars. So I don't know how many of Tim might bang on about this more than me, but we have a project to try and grow more black poplars in the county. They're magnificent landscape trees. They're increasingly rare, and not many of them are being planted. And wearing my high chef's hat for a minute, this is a project I am challenging the county to complete on, and through the work of with the help of the Lee Valley Regional Park and through Tim's good offices, we have harvested 200 strikes, which are short sections of clean black poplar, genuine black poplar material. They are planted up and we'll be distributing them around the county. So if anybody knows a good place for black poplar, please talk to Tim or I after this, because we've got some to help with this year. So they're wonderful trees, and please ask me about that. So just some closing thoughts, really. Collaboration. I think collaboration is absolutely vital. All of this conservation, as we all know, has to be landscape scale. We talked about the Animal Reserve. Right at the beginning I showed you how that was adjacent to the land that we farm. And most of what we've been able to do is been because we are developing what they are doing down there. We have the opportunity to take that further and further up the River Ash on a landscape scale. So that's absolutely essential. Collaboration in terms of other organisations. So the Herts and Middlesex Wildlife Trust, many people involved in that are familiar with it. It's wonderful the work they do through their senior team and the help they give us farmers and the volunteers too. The Farming and Wildlife Advisory Group, absolutely essential in terms of advice that farmers go to be able to help with these challenges. Farmer clusters, again, some of you will have heard of those, where farmers are getting together. It's a relatively new concept. It does take time to build confidence in that process, but the more farmers can get together and talk to each other, the better. The local nature recovery strategy, again, many of you will be involved in that perhaps, but trying to recognise Hertfordshire's assets and celebrate them and bring money to them where we can. We must work together. Time of great change and uncertainty, it is. I've touched on this already. Farmers are facing significant commercial pressures. We've talked about yield, we've talked about pricing, and the support mechanisms are changing and some of them falling away. We're talking about change in terms of climate, a warming climate, pressure on insects and warming trout streams and all sorts. There's a lot of change and a lot of uncertainty, and that applies as much to you as it does to me. Inspiration from experts. This is an important one. I wanted to write it down. As a farmer, I'm learning all the time, and that's one of the privileges. And we are changing our farming practices, and we're taking things forward. But every time and again, we find ourselves looking to experts. And I just wrote a quick list of the experts that we've worked with closely over the years. Liz Goodyear, Andrew Wood on the butterflies, Robert Phillips, I mentioned, you saw a slide of him earlier. Colin Plant on moths, I have his book. I don't know much about moths, but I turn the pages and I love it. And it just inspires me, the stuff we do. We had a bat surveys done a little while ago by the Herts and Middlesex. Phil and your work in the fisheries, it's really, really useful to know you can ring up and talk to people and they'll give you sound advice. Tim Hill, well, I need to say no more. Tim Hill. Sarah Hay from the Herts and Middlesex Wildlife Trust, again, she masterminded all the works we've done on the River Ash. It's fantastic to be able to work with these people. Lucy Jenkins from FWAG, and Elizabeth Ranelagh, another name, she recently retired from FWAG, who absolutely is the go-to person for so many farmers when they want to sort of figure out the harsh realities, commercial realities, and the agronomics with the different species, the different schemes. It's a difficult world to navigate, and people like that. So these experts, we do take inspiration from these experts, and they're really important in the work that we do. And lastly, sort of nurture through nature, coming back to that. So that is my theme for this year as High Sheriff. It is really, really important in terms of access to the countryside for people, just getting out for their well-being, for mental health. But understanding, so much of the Natural History Society here is doing is promoting understanding. And that's so valuable for young people especially. And what Hannah was saying earlier about mentoring, I think it really resonates, that more people, this knowledge can be passed on to another generation. It's really important. Nurture through nature, it is about mental health. And there's a lot of that about, there's a bit of a crisis in that world at the moment. I think I've already banged on long enough. There we are, that's easy, thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'd be delighted.